G'day Doggies fans, g'day all. It's the NRL Media Watch Episode 6 Grand Final Edition. And we have the Broncos and the Panthers. And what are the headlines leading into this week? We had Adam G and his record with the Broncos. I'm going to go through that record and put some perspective onto that. I did a similar thing with Jared Sutton and the Bulldogs from 2015 over a much wider scale. And there was definitely some concerns there, but you also have to take into perspective where the teams are on the ladder that they're playing, the form at the time, and the results of the other referees and the actual overall results of that team in the season. But we found that Souths do very well under Jared Sutton and as a whole, and it's no lie that they've had the most penalties of any other side from him, etc. But let's look at Adam G. We're going to look at this stat here, plus Paul Crawley put a focus on the protection of Nathan Cleary when he's doing his kicking, and the likes of Isaiah Yeo and others, the way that they protect him from the ruck, from the play the ball to stop prospective chasers from getting close to him. And I'll show you, and it's no surprise that they wait until round 23 to produce some footage on that. I'm going to show you a little footage of some Broncos players, namely Pat Carrigan, where they run to deliberately impede the line. So they run off their line to stop the play, to get in the player's road, and usually put a hand on the player or go in front of them, then try and move at the last second. But their eyes are definitely on the player, and you'll see that this is an absolute storm in a teacup. For the Broncos, the way they've been playing, it's very, very hard. Their play the ball domination's been so good that it's so hard for teams to actually, even get from marker to their kickers. Like, the way that they do it is so good that they don't need to do that a lot of the time. But I'll show you examples where they've done it in 3 different matches. And just to show you that it's not only the Panthers who do it. It's pretty much, I could show you all the sides of it. I know my side, the Bulldogs, do it as well. Every team does it. So it's just absolutely farcical that the Newscorp-owned organisation focus on the opposition team in the grand final, obviously to put pressure on the referees. But let's look at this record with Adam G. In 2020, he refereed 2 Broncos matches. They finished with the wooden spoon that year. And those matches were well into the season when they were performing poorly. They lost to the West Tigers at Leichhardt 48-0 in front of a crowd of 2,600. And they also lost 58-12 at the SCG in front of a crowd of 3,841. And that was to the Sydney Roosters, who finished well up the ladder in 2020 and were the previous year's premiers. So let's look at 2021. He refereed the Broncos lost to Parramatta at Suncorp. So that's 3 losses on the trot under Adam G. They then had their first win against the Gold Coast at Suncorp. So 1 win, 3 losses. Then lost 46-0 to Souths. Souths, who went on to make the grand final that year, versus the Broncos side, which was trying to get itself off the bottom of the table under Kevy Walters for his first season. So it's 1 win, 4 losses for the Bronx under Adam G. And then a loss to the Sharks in 2021, who I think made the 8. So 1 win, 5 losses under Adam G, and a team that had finished wooden spoon and I think bottom 4 the following year. Don't hold me to that. I think it was bottom 4 or bottom 5. Last year, 2022, didn't lost to North Queensland. So that's 1 win, 5 losses, or 6 losses now. He doesn't referee too many of their games. That was at Suncorp, lost to North Queensland, who finished top 4 that year. They then lost 40-12 versus Penrith, which were the reigning premiers, obviously. So that's 1-7. They then beat the Knights at Newcastle. So 2-7. Lost to Melbourne, so 2-8. Lost to the Cowboys again, both top 4 teams. So most of these are top 4 teams that they've played, and they've lost these games, which is telling. So that's 2-8, 2-9. I've lost count now. Then lost to the West Tigers towards the end of the season, where they lost up most of their games and went from top 4 to finishing outside of the 8. So there you go. So 2 wins, 9 losses. That brings us to this year. And all this is designed to put focus on the referee to give them an advantage. They beat the Dolphins under Adam G to get their 3rd win. They lost to Penrith at home. So there you go. Who else have they played? They then beat Parramatta 54-10. They beat Canberra on his. So that I think that, what's that? 5 wins or 4 wins and 8 or 9 losses. So whatever they reported seems to be a little bit far, not exactly what they were reporting. It seems to be a little bit exaggerated. But under Adam G, they've got a winning record this year. So we go back to it. They have only lost once under the refereeing of Adam G in 2023, and have won 2 games, I think. 3 games. 3 wins, 1 loss in 2023, which is relative to their season. So it's absolute bullshit, is what I'm going to say. And now we're going to look through the draw. Broncos draw for 2023. Had to go and play the Panthers in Penrith, which is never easy. Round 1, best time to do it. Mind you, the Chaos, the lab predictor said that the Broncos had the hardest draw for 2023. Play the Cowboys at Suncorp in round 2. The Dragons at Suncorp in round 3. The Dolphins at Suncorp in round 4. An away game. The Tigers at Suncorp in round 5. The Raiders at Suncorp in round 6. Then they only have to go to the Gold Coast for round 7. Then play at Darwin, which is a Parramatta home game, so that's not the Broncos' fault. But they've played in New South Wales once in the first 2 months. 6 games in Queensland, 1 in Darwin in the heat. Then the Rabbits at Suncorp Stadium in round 9, and then get to be the away team in Magic Round at Suncorp Stadium in round 10. So in the first 10 rounds, 8 games at Suncorp Stadium. Then have to travel to Melbourne, in which they go down to the Storm on a Thursday night. And yet to play a Sunday game, all Friday nights and a couple of Saturday nights. So tough for the Broncos. Then played the Panthers at Suncorp Stadium in round 12. in which they lost. They then go to Napier to play the Warriors, in which they got away with that match in round 13. Second time to Sydney in round 14 against the Sharks. So, between the start of the season and June, they played one game, only 2 games in Sydney. Then Suncorp Stadium again in round 15. Then they get the bye. Then Suncorp Stadium again in round 17. And no 5-day turnarounds for the Broncos. Most of the time, 7 days, quite a few 6 days. Then at the Gabba in round 18. Round 19 bye. Have to travel to Belmore in round 20. So they've so far travelled to Sydney twice, Darwin once and Melbourne once in the first 20 rounds. Then Sunshine Coast home game for the Rabbits against the Broncos. Well, you can't say it's the Broncos' fault, but it's a good draw, I can tell you that much. No 5-day turnarounds. Then again in Queensland at the Gabba round 22. Then have to travel to Suncorp Stadium on an 8-day turnaround to Townsville, where they defeat the Cowboys. Then back to the Gabba, 6 days later for the Eels, another bye, before having to travel down to the GIO in round 26, and then back at Suncorp Stadium for round 27. So I count 3 games in Sydney. And how many Sydney teams are there? You couldn't script it. You couldn't script it, could you? So well done, Broncos, on a great season. You played really well. Had to go to Sydney 3 times. Had to go to Darwin and New Zealand. Yep. 5 games away from Queensland. 1 in the Sunshine Coast and 1 at Townsville. The rest were all in Brisbane. Oh, and the Gold Coast, so. That is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And because obviously did so well, get 2 home finals at Suncorp in which they demolished their opposition. And now play the Panthers in the grand final. So there you go. Just a quick one, just to show you how the Newscorp juggernaut works. To focus on the referee before the grand final for NRL 360 and Paul Crawley, to focus on the Penrith Panthers protecting their kicker. And look, it's blatantly wrong, but if you run off your line to impede someone, unless you're trying to support the ball carrier, you are breaching the rules. Penrith do it a little bit more exaggerated. It's definitely deliberate. But I've showed you the footage there of the Broncos players with their eyes on the player chasing with the intention to impede. And as I said, they don't have to do it too much because of the way they play. Their ruck speed has been absolutely phenomenal, which is a credit to them. But you'll notice the Panthers will slow them down, and you'll notice both sides will try to impede the kickers. And we may see some pressure that's been applied turn into penalties in a grand final for plays which have done by all teams in the competition, and that would be an absolute shame. An absolute shame. Let them play the way they've been playing. Don't start to focus on things in a grand final just because News Corp have decided that they want the Broncos to win. I think the Broncos are a massive chance of winning this game regardless. They are a very good team, with or without help in the draw. But as I showed you, their draw was brilliant, even though their own Fox Lab sports predictor said they had the hardest draw of all sides. Under G, they have the grand final referee. They've won 3 out of 4 games this year. In the previous seasons, they mainly lost to top 4 sides. And lost games in their wooden spoon season. All right? So it's completely relative. I cannot find an outlier there. I've gone and watched the games as well. And look, refs fuck things up all the time. For both sides, we know that. And the Broncos at the time, with Anthony Seibold, really did underperform that year. They were supposed to finish top 4 and finish with a wooden spoon. So there you go. But yet, just another example of the NRL media, especially on the Newscorp side of things, really trying to help the team that they own, that their company owns. And I'm sure there is some direction because of it. Because, it's about, there'll be lots of praise going to those who write those stories and find out that information. But when we look at the facts and look at it with perspective and fairly and without bias, it shows that there's a complete bias towards the Broncos in the way that this is all reported. And that is not what we want to see on grand final week. Highlight Penrith at the start of the season, not at the end. Not on the grand final. Unless you're going to take the comb through the Broncos as well. I spent, 20 minutes looking through a few games and just were able to find a few examples of the similar sort of thing. Okay? Anyway, guys, thanks for listening and take care. Bye-bye.